On this week's Inside Track, we talk with a man who he and his team set the standard in first responding not only 24 hours a day off the track, but at the racetrack as well. My good friend Jay Masur joins us. Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Rod. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Back in 1976 was a fateful day. Before that, you and your dad and your family were huge race fans, obviously. But that night was a tragic night, and that really kind of took your family from just race fans to somewhat more than that.
At Huset's, my dad and I and our whole family used to sit up at the top of the hill to the left on top of a wood pile. And that was from the mid-60s all the way to 1976, the date that you're talking about.
We lost Gary Bott that night, and about that night, what was it that your dad saw that made him want to start the Huset's rescue crew?
When the unfortunate accident with Mr. Bott happened, my dad saw the need for more training out there at the racetrack, but also saw a place where he could actually train his firemen in techniques that they couldn't get trained in on a daily basis. So my father went out there along with Jeff Kronk, and they approached Huset's, and from that moment on, we started what we know today as the Huset's / MedStar Dirt Track Race Rescue Team.
Yep. All boys try to learn things from their dad, if possible. What was it that you learned from your dad, and at what point did you decide you wanted to, quote unquote, carry the torch?
As a dad, you always want your kids to travel further than you did. I'm not sure I could ever do that with what my dad has accomplished. But you know, what I've learned from him is just the point of when you're going to do something, you do it correctly, you do it right, you learn as much as you can about it. And if you don't know, you find out and you ask. And that's kind of what we've been doing here is, you know, there's no books in race rescue, there's no books in the things that we've done, so we're starting to write them. We're starting to make things that'll help other people make racing safety better in their own areas. In our own experience, I've watched my friends die, get maimed, and get hurt, and I couldn't do anything about it because I wasn't trained.
You've been in this a long time, obviously, but there was a point where you really thought about hanging the thing up. Back in the mid to late 80s, we lost Bill Rook and one of the officials outside of the backstretch at Huset's. That took a big toll on you. It
was a horrible experience. Bill Rook was a friend of mine, and he was one of the best racers of the time. And a week before he died, he come up to me and says, "You know, Jay, if anything ever happened to me, I hope it happens right here because I know that you'll save me." And the following week, it happened.
It's tough. And that leads me to the emotional part of it. Obviously, you're very emotional, and so am I. How do you keep the emotions at bay when you try to go and help a driver, per se?
From that moment on, after my friend had passed away at the racetrack, I wanted to quit. My dad wouldn't let me. He says, "You got to hop on the horse one more time," and he made me come back out to the track. And when I came back out to the track, I had drivers coming hugging me, and I had my dad and so forth. From that moment on, I realized it was more than just a race rescue team. It was a family. It was people that cared about each other. The one thing my dad taught me is he says, you know, when you're out there doing your job, you have to wipe the slates clean, you have to wipe the faces off, and you have to act like you're just working on a plastic dummy, especially when you're working on a friend. And I've taken my dad's philosophy and I live with that today. Sometimes I often not look at the car number when I get to the car. You know, so there's certain things that we all do to try to protect ourselves psychologically in those types of moments.
Last but not least, I don't know if a lot of people know this or not, but you and your team are scheduled for about 70 shows across the country this year. Talk about those shows and what you can take from it, and then what other rescue crews around the country can take from what you can teach them.
Sure, and a lot of that is a courtesy of Tony Stewart. He's really made a lot of this possible. He's given us the best of the best to work with. But what we're doing right now as we speak is we go to these shows that we're working, and if the teams there want to learn, we'll spend time with them before the show and go through some extrication techniques and go through some techniques on how to properly put out these methanol and ethanol fires, and we'll talk a little bit about the medical portions and talk a little bit about these cars when they get damaged, how you take them apart, how you get the guys out of those confined race seats. So, you know, we're not only working the shows as we go out, we're hopefully leaving the track better than what we found it.
Keep up the good work, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Jay Masur sets the standard. His dad was inducted into the Houston Speedway Hall of Fame in 2003. He's a shoo-in as well. Jay Masur on this week's Inside Track.